I think we're live right now. Yeah. Okay, so, well, thanks everybody for being here online, and thanks Eugene and Francisco, our next speakers, our speakers for this January 2021 event, the first meetup we're holding. Let me share briefly my screen with you, and yeah, I'll just go briefly through the our agenda for today. You attendees will be checking this on YouTube, so you might have seen this or not before, but this is what we have for today. Francisco Franco, Android developer at Snap Mobile. He'll be talking about I finished my app, now what? After his experience of, well, finishing a few apps and working as well on his own kernel app for some time. Eugene Petrenko, working on IntelliJ on JetBrains at IntelliJ, if I'm right. We'll be speaking about inline fun with Kotlin.
Yeah.
And last but not least, I'll be speaking about coroutines for the JVM. So if you see this on YouTube and you leave any comments, we'll be able to see them anytime. Hello, Lubomir. I see you already wrote. And yeah, we'll be happy to interact with you and answer your questions if we happen to know the answers. So with that said, I think I'll give a space now to Francisco, which is going to be our first speaker. And see you later, folks. Francisco, the stage is all yours.
Oh, my connection is kind of crappy.
Okay, I removed the old Francisco and add the new one. The old one is still here, apparently.
Yeah, God damn it.
Okay, Francisco, everything yours.
Okay, so hi, folks. My name is Francisco. I'm from Portugal. I'm an Android developer for quite a while, for the recent 10 years or so. Before we start into this presentation, I'm going to talk a bit more about myself for you to get some idea of whatever I've been doing recently. And sorry, because my presentation was blocked. Yeah. So this presentation is called I Finished My App and Now What? Which is basically a collection of different steps where you can take after you finish your own app, because most of the times, especially if it's your first app, after you finished building it, you're kind of like, okay, what now? How do I market my app? How do I make money? How do I reach users? So this is just a collection of stuff that I've collected through my experience. I'd like this presentation to be super relaxed. If you have questions about anything, you can ask me. It's like free for all. So yeah, I've been developing my apps since 2010, I think. I was just on the university and I was barely scrapping to make my classes because it was pretty boring. And then I decided one day to learn Java because I wasn't paying much attention in my classes. So I did it on myself and started building my own apps. And now here I am doing this talk. Currently, I'm working with Snap Mobile, where I was partnered with Enrique in a recent client project, and he graciously invited me to make this presentation. So here we are. We finished your app, and then where do we go from here? I think before we actually start to talk about that, we should think about the mission. The mission is the motivation of why we built the app. In my point of view, you have two different missions. One, you build the app for fun. You're learning and technology. You're just doing it on your free time. You have nothing better to do. Whatever it is, that's fine, and it's okay. But then some other times you make an app because you want to make some money. And that was my motivation. So that was my mission. And that's absolutely fine as well. So, but before you actually decide to build an app, you must realize that the goal is to make money, but you still have to have fun. And without the fun part and without making an app for you that you would use, it's very likely that the money won't follow. So that's my number one rule. It's something that I like to use myself, or it's going to solve a problem for me. That was exactly why I built my first app, which was a kernel manager. I was tired of booting my device into the recovery or into the bootloader, and it was a very slow process. The device was very old, very slow, and I was wasting precious minutes, and I really had to use those minutes to code. So I decided, okay, let's go. And only after I finished the first draft, which was horrible, by the way, I thought that maybe I could make some money with it, because there was nothing on the market that actually did exactly what I needed. So after, I think it was like 6 months, because it was so slow doing all of that. And back then you had Eclipse, and not IntelliJ or Android Studio. So you wasted a long time doing cleanups and restarting and hoping that the builds were fine. So yeah, after 6 months, I decided, okay, let's release an app for €1 and see what happens. Then from there on, led me here. So yeah, that's the one of the motivations. And if your first motivation is to make money, and then the rest, then I think it's the wrong decision, because ultimately you're likely going to fail. So after you have that mission on your head, you finish your app, you probably, the first thing you have to think is the economic model of how exactly are you going to monetize your app. And in that case, you have 2 or 3 options, which are very valid. The first one is a straight up purchase. You build the app, you release the app for like €2, and then the user goes to the Play Store, buys the app, and then it's theirs forever. Okay, that's okay, but then after that specific user purchases your app, it's very hard to make any more money out of that user, because they already invested in you, and then the only choice you have is to add like more in-app purchases inside the app or ads, but then it's going to leave a sour taste on the user's mouth, because they already gave you money. So, and then you're asking for more. So that's kind of hard to swallow after a while. Then you have the usual, the freemium apps, which is a free app with an in-app purchase to unlock certain features or unlock the entire app, which is currently I think the most successful way of monetizing your app, because it gives you the user some time to test the features and decide if they actually want the app or not. If the app is for a straight purchase, the users also have a 48 hours period of refund time, but I don't think most of them actually know that. So what's going to happen is two scenarios. Either they uninstall the app right away, which automatically refunds the price if you're within that 48-hour period, or they're just going to the Play Store and leave like a 1-star rating saying something like, I hated the app, it's not working, bye-bye. You still keep the money, but if they don't uninstall the app or refund it, but it's not nice. And there's a third option, which I've been testing on one of my apps recently, which is it's like a freemium app, but you allow the user to view like a video ad per day, and it unlocks all the features for 24 hours. So they can keep testing the app for as long as they'd like, but you can still make a few cents every time they watch the video, which is not perfect, but it's going to lead to a point where the user really likes the app and they are tired of watching the video, so they just go through and purchase your unlock. Yeah, so those are the three scenarios, the three things that you can do to make some money. Then it's your choice to do whatever you want. Currently, I think either the second option or the third option are the best. So the price, for example, imagine your app is going to be a third purchase. You can choose the price based on either the value that you give the app. For example, if it's like a video editor, you want to actually ask for more money because of its bigger value. But in the end, if the user is for like India or Russia or some country with a lower GDP, sometimes it's harder for them to understand that they really have to pay for an app, especially because some countries like India, piracy is huge. So it's a hard gamble. For example, what I've done in a couple of my apps is guide myself with something called the Big Mac index. So you price the app around the McDonald's Big Mac price on that country, because they change the price per country to be adapted to their realities, and that's usually a nice threshold for you to price it. If it's a in-app purchase, I would also lower the price for countries like India, because in that specific country, it's not everyone, but it's a vast majority of the population doesn't have much means. They still have smartphones, but they cannot justify the price of an app. So they either pirate the app or just don't use it. So if you make the app cheaper on that country, it's likely that there's going to be less piracy, and even if you make a small amount, you still make some because you make in volume, not in the price itself. But in other countries like UK or Germany, or the US, they rather there's a higher probability that they're going to purchase the app for a higher price, because of also the perceived notion of higher price, higher quality in those countries. So it's always a gamble. So not yet. So you're done with all of that. You know the price. You've set it up. You have all that in your head. So now I think the next step is you really have to test your infrastructure for at least 1 week, 2 weeks if it's a small app, because the first 30 days after the app has been released are the strongest that you'll ever have on your app. Unless it's a big update, it's rather unlikely that you'll have a big of an impact money-wise after the first 30 days. Sometimes 60 days, kind of depends, but it's usually the first 30 days. So nothing can really be messed up in the beginning. Otherwise, it's a big downfall. Also, being a developer sometimes isn't really just building an app. Sometimes there's an opportunity that arises, and I'll tell you a story of something that happened to me recent 6 years ago, maybe 7 years ago. So we had a friend that had an app, quite cool app called KUG, but he couldn't publish paid apps on this country. So I was checking Twitter and I saw his tweets, and then I reached out to him like, man, I have the reach. We can publish the app on my developer account. I'll deal with the marketing. I'll deal with reaching people, and we split the price, the revenue 50-50. So we did that, and if I didn't reach out to him and to allow that opportunity, we wouldn't be able to make any money, and his app would be kind of forgotten forever. And at the end of the day, he was able to buy a car after all the money we did, and I didn't have much work, but I still allowed him to have something, and I still had something for myself. So the take from this is watch out for opportunities. When you want to build an app, sometimes it's not about making the app you really want or making that perfect product, but check out for opportunities. Sometimes they arise, a small niche in the market. Sometimes it's the best way to make a cool product and then make some money at the end of it. So after this quick money introduction, which is also always very funny to talk about, some quick tips about stuff that I've noticed. For example, localization. It's important. Depends on the type of app. If it's very technical and you're always making updates, it's kind of hard to keep up with localization because they're expensive, and you end up wasting more money than you probably want to. For example, on my kernel app, it's like thousands of strings, and it's very specific, very technical. It's very hard to localize. So instead of having that extra work, I just decided to have it in English. But if you really, really think that your app has a broader reach, it's a general app, and you don't have that many strings to care about, it's probably worth it to localize to reach more people, especially in Brazil, for example. It's a huge market, and they don't speak much of English, or they don't understand much of English. I'm being general, but I'm sure there's lots of Brazilians that speak amazing English. But what I've encountered is they have harder time to deal when it's not in Portuguese. So in those specific cases, it's probably worth to make a localization of your app. And then on the Play Store. So your Play Store page, you should probably either localize the title and the description, because it's an entryway to your app, or just use the Google translation. For example, it's better than not having it translated. And then, yeah, setting up the Play Store. And then after that is done, it's super important that your screenshots are professional. For example, one thing that I really like to do is have a clean status bar. When I'm searching for apps on the Play Store and they don't have a clean status bar, I really just close the page, because if the developer didn't have the care to build nice screenshots, it's like halfway of probably not having a cared application, or having that extra mile to provide that quality. So be careful with that. Make sure your screenshots are really taken care of. There's the discussion of, should I have my screenshots with a device frame or without a device frame? I think it works the same way, both ways. For example, the guidelines from the Android team, they say that you shouldn't use a device frame on any screenshot. I don't know why. I think it kind of depends on your taste in that specific case. But I've worked with both, and either a device frame or without a device frame works the same. Never really saw a difference in reachability. Also, never use names of other apps on your descriptions, because they will trigger like an automated bot cleanup from the Play Store. And usually you're going to be suspended, it's likely, because there's people that just write different applications names on their descriptions to trigger search keywords. For example, if you write Facebook, Instagram, WhatsApp, it's on your description, it's likely that when someone is searching for those apps, your app is going to show up somewhere in there. So to prevent that thing to be gamified and abused, Google has a bot that just searches for that, and if the app doesn't have anything to do with whatever's on the description, you're going to get an email and you're going to be suspended. It's likely. It has happened to me before. Usually they unsuspend after a few days because it's a small thing. But if you keep repeating those patterns, you're going to get suspended for real. Yeah, and the screenshots shouldn't have any copyrighted or image, or nor names or images copyrighted. For example, if it's a music app, don't have like a Metallica or Ariana Grande on your screenshots, because you're going to get some trouble. So yeah, everything is sorted. You're almost ready to release your app. Your Play Store is sorted. Everything it's drafted. It's ready to publish. But before that happens, you really have to reach out for the blogs, the Android blogs. They run the machine. For example, Android Police, Fandroid, and whatever. I'm sorry. And other non-blogs. So to reach out to them, you really have to prepare a media kit, which is composed of your screenshots, an APK, unprotected APK, if it's a paid app, or an APK with a promo code, so that they don't have to use their own money to purchase the app and test the app. Write a small descriptive description of your app on the email or Twitter DM, however you use it to contact them. And sometimes you can also add a 30 seconds or 1 minute video if you've prepared that, so they can use on their platforms, and also an icon. So if you prepare this media kit for them, there's a higher probability that they are going to pay some attention to your app. And since you're making all this work for them, preparing all this, they don't have to do it themselves for the actual post if they write it. So they'll be happier and see that you're professional, and it's a long way. If you go this route, I advise you to contact them around 1 or 2 weeks before the deadline that you've set for yourself to release the app, because sometimes they don't see their messages right away. They take time because they have other things planned. So I'm sorry. So make sure that there's enough time between the application release and when you send these media kits to them. Sometimes you can also schedule these things with them. For example, tell them you're planning on releasing the app in a week, and schedule with them to see if it matches the release schedule of their blog posts, for everything to match, so that when they post this post, either your app is about to be released or it's already there, ready for download, because you don't want the user to read a blog post, see a cool app, and then go to the store and not see the app there. That's going to hurt. Okay, so who to contact? Yeah, it's a hard job, because you have to kind of scan the web for contacts. There's no database, so you just have to go to Android Police, see whoever works there, search them on Twitter, see their emails, see their the contacts, the preferred contact messaging platform, whatever. Send them a message. Be professional and be concise. Never write them huge text, because the bigger the text description, the bigger the likeliness of not paying any attention to whatever you're trying to do. So always be direct, concise, and don't ask anything from them. Either tell them what you can do for them, because they make money from ads most of the times. So they don't need you. You need them. So make sure they see the value of whatever you're trying to do and whatever you can bring to them. Because if it's a popular app, if it's something controversial or something that's going to bring traffic to their website, it's very likely that they're going to publish something for you. So Oh yeah, and then Reddit too. Yeah, Reddit helps. Reddit, it's a world of chance. Sometimes they remove your posts. Sometimes they allow your posts there. Reddit, when it catches up, you can make some nice returns from your investment on Reddit. But I would rather pay the time to reach out to blogs instead of betting on Reddit. And YouTube, I don't think it's worth your time, because most YouTubers either they don't care about apps, and the ones that do care about apps usually ask for a fee. For example, if it's a popular channel that it's their job is to review apps, they're likely going to ask you like $100, $200, $1,000 just for the privilege of them to talk about your app. And I don't think that's a nice value proposition. You'd rather get that money and for yourself to go have some dinner or something. So everything is there, everything is done. Oh yeah, and Android blogs are your friends, kind of. I remember that they are not your friends. They really want to make money from ads. So make sure you're giving something to them. So the app is ready. The blog post is out. Everything is running. Your app is in production. You're seeing engagement. Everything, you're providing your users support. Everything is flowing. How do you keep the pace? Now that's the harder part. There's no magic solution. What I would like to suggest is never push updates in other days other than Tuesday and Wednesday. Never release an update on a Sunday. Never release an update on the Monday. Thursday sometimes is okay, but not recommended. Friday, Saturday, Sunday, Monday, they're all forbidden days for updates, especially if it's a big one, because somehow, I don't know why. I mean, the weekends, it's normal to understand because people are with their families, they are doing other stuff. They're not scrolling Twitter or checking websites. Monday, I don't know why, but the engagement on Monday is terrible. Tuesday, for some reason, I don't know why, I don't have the data, but it's always the best day to make an update, especially if it's a big one. The engagement it's way different. Wednesday also, it's okay. Especially on the Tuesday, after the New York time, for example, after 9 a.m. New York time, or you can sync up with the West Coast, San Francisco. After 9 a.m., it's your choice. But the US market is big, it's huge, it's the most important market. So make sure you're not releasing updates when everyone in America is sleeping, because you'll lose momentum. Also, the last one, sorry. Make sure you sometimes you make some giveaways on Twitter. For example, something that I've tried before is write a small tweet which includes a link to your own app, and then you can post a promo code for your app every 5 reshares or every 10 reshares or retweets. So sorry. And then that keeps the whole tree growing. So 5 reshares, you post a link, you post a promo code for your own app, someone catches it, but then they're always retweeting, and the tree of retweets gets bigger, so your tweet spreads, and then everyone can see the link to your app, and it's very likely that they're going to either check out your app or purchase it. So that the cost is small for you, because you're not wasting money, you're just not making money off those promo codes that you're sharing. So it's a small cost of acquisition, which I think it's okay. If it was an ad, you're paying for an ad, but here you're not paying for anything. You're just not making money from that specific user. But if you also have other in-app purchases on your app, you can also make money from those after the user has already used that promo code. So yeah, this I don't have much to say about how to keep up the pace, other than make sure you keep your users happy, be respectful, respond to their comments on the Play Store page. Sometimes you have to be tough with some users that try to abuse you, but try to be respectful and don't make everything that they ask. So if they ask you for a red theme or pink theme of your app, or different themes, different colors, make sure you also never lose your identity, but at the same time, make sure that they are heard and they feel that they're treated with respect. Sometimes in the beginning, I was a bit tough with some users because you're tired and you just don't want to hear some bullshit. But at the same time, you grow and you feel like they're paying for your food and your stuff. So try to be respectful, and I guess that's a note to myself, because I kind of grew there. But that's very important. Keep up your updates, make sure they're heard, and don't leave the app to be abandoned, because if users feel the app is going to be abandoned, eventually they're going to either rate your app 1 star and then you're good to go. Yeah, it's a very scary process, especially because you don't know if you're going to make, if you depend on this, you don't know if you're going to make enough money to pay your bills. If you have a family, it depends on you. It's tougher. It wasn't what happened to me, because I was still fresh from college and had nothing to do besides working on these things, nothing to support. So I didn't have that pressure on me. But if you have that pressure, plan your stuff and don't make any rash decisions. Make sure it's worth it. But it's kind of scary because it takes time and there's a market saturation. But if it's the right product, you make all your steps are correct. It's easy to use and engaging stuff follows, and people will pay for your work and will have success. If you don't have that success, it's also okay. Rather fail fast and try again in some app. Don't keep working on the same thing if it's not making any dent on the universe or it's not making anything for you. Don't be afraid to fail. Fail, it's okay. I failed before many times. Yeah, I'm going to fail in the future too. But at the same time, you're also going to have success. So never be tired of failing, because you will learn a lot when you fail. And I think that's the biggest lesson. But yeah, also have fun. It's very important to have fun at the same time. If you have any questions, I don't know the process of these talks, but if you have any questions, I'm always happy to reply. I'm not watching the stream, but I'm very happy to reply to any questions. Here's my Twitter handle. You can contact me anytime, send me a message. I'll be more than happy to follow up with anything you want to. And I think that's it. Thank you, Enrique, so much for the invitation. I hope it was a enticing talk with stuff that usually nobody talks about. Yeah, thank you.
Thank you for coming, Francisco. And yeah, it seems that we have one question from Eugene. Eugene, since you're on the video, maybe you want to query directly?
Yeah, sure. Thank you, Francisco. It was really interesting and cool. And you've been talking a little bit about the copyrighted materials and images, and I just realized that sometimes I've seen some phones being photoed in some description of an app. Is it allowed to have a particular phone on this picture, or it's again a copyrighted thing?
I think phones, it's okay. I never saw any copyright that comes from phones. It's mostly when it's media. It's copyrighted almost right away. I had a friend that's now working at Google that was also working on apps before, and he had a storage manager with Dropbox, Google Drive, everything on the same app. And at the beginning, he had a few screenshots which obviously were describing the use of his app, because it was storing files and images and videos. And he had some movie screenshot in there. And then after a couple of days, he was struck instantly with the suspension of, and not much to go with. So they when they contact you, most of the times they don't tell you exactly what it is, just tell you it's copyrighted material, fix it or you'll be suspended. It's quite scary, but yeah, it's something to be to pay attention. It's quite tough. I hope that answers you.
Yeah, thank you.
So Livomir has another question. Do approach new apps you're gonna build with the mindset to try out some new tech, or do you approach new apps you wanna build with the mindset to try some new tech, or do you prefer to keep a well-known tech stack for your most promising ideas?
I mostly, myself personally, when I do something, it's trying to solve some problem on myself, or it's going to enhance my life in some way. It's never to try new technology, but that's personal. I know I don't want to waste my time building an app just to try. For example, Kotlin. I only started Kotlin when I started with Snapmobile, because I never had that motivation to just build a new app to try a new language. But that's me. There's probably other people that it's the other way around. I think kind of it's personal. I guess it's how you perceive your time and how you value your time. I guess. But if you're going to the mindset of building an app to make money or to make an actual product, you better plan that differently, not just to see what happens, I guess. But for me, it's a bit mechanical because I've done that so many times. Maybe I don't have that pressure mindset of, okay, what now, or okay, what should I do? But trying is better than not trying, I guess. But it's a personal approach, I think. Hopefully that answered it.
Okay, folks, if you have more questions, feel free to write them. If you don't, remember that Francisco is on Twitter and he's quite active there. So I'm sure they can write you, Francisco, or ping you if there is any topic they want to check, right?
Yeah, I'm available anytime. Twitter, email. It's fine. Probably I left some stuff out from this talk because most of this it comes from my experience, my head, and I've done so much that probably something that's been forgotten. But yeah, anything. I don't have any problems talking money as well. So if you have any questions about any specifics or about something, it's okay for me to talk about as well, which is usually a forbidden topic. People are always afraid to talk about that, but it's an important part of this, and it's fine for me. So ask away.
Great. Then yeah, thank you so much, Francisco, and Eugene. Now it's going to be your turn, so I'll be removing Francisco's screen.
Thank you, guys.
And see you. Eugene, the stage is all yours.
Okay, thank you. So, hi everyone. Well, it's really interesting to give a talk online. I don't see you, and I'm not sure how many of you are there. I used to be joking, like saying, okay, if you just waiting for your time to speak and you're nervous, you can just start counting people, and it helps just to concentrate your mind on something. And here I can't do this. Well, I'm hopefully not that scared, but anyways, I don't see how you react on me. If you're gonna be looking to this presentation recorded, then probably it's a good idea to faster playback so that it will help you. Well, I have these two QR codes on the beginning. The left one is with the presentation slides, and the right one is the Twitter handle of mine, so you can reach me and ask your question, or of course use their YouTube comments for this. Okay, so this talk is called Inline Fun, or Inline Fun with Kotlin, and I'm Eugene. I'm working at JetBrains, but I'm not doing Kotlin so far. So the whole story I present, it's something I found, and it's not like directly related to Kotlin. So but I hope it works and I hope you can use it. Well, and to start with, I want to ask you if you see some difference between these two options. This is a program in Kotlin, and what we do, we have a list of numbers, and we try to map it to compute the squares of these numbers. Well, the first one and the second one, and while you're taking time to figure out what's different, let me try to start explaining that. And we start with the second one, and here's the second one, the option 2, where we have the sequence and the map function. And so this is how this map function is defined. This is just a copy-paste from the standard library. And in fact, what we see here that a new object is created once we map something. A sequence to yet another sequence is just a wrapper of a sequence. It's somewhat comparable to what we have in Java 8 streams. Well, this is how it works. And in fact, it works lazily. So it uses our Lambda. And it has to create this Lambda instance for you. And then depending on if this Lambda captures parameters or not, it's either cached somewhere or just created in place. Well, as I mentioned, that's quite similar to what Java Streams does. The only difference is that Java C may use some trickier instructions at the bytecode level, but anyways, an object which is implementing some given interface is created depending on the parameters. Well, this is how it is. So, but this is a lazy way to map some elements. So if I would use, for example, an infinite list as a beginning, this will all work because the streams thing will not do any work unless we need it. So it will just say, okay, I will map this, but that's it. But I guess you were expecting some inline fun, aren't you? Well, and here's some inline fun for you. So I'll be using these underlines along the presentation to show some interesting stuff. And now I jump to the first example where we call the map on the list of directly. And when you just go into the documentation or the sources, you see that this map function is declared with some fancy inline keyword in a Kotlin. But what does that mean? How would it work? This is what we will be talking about today. Well, and there, before we go, let's see. This function for map calls the map2 function. Well, I'm curious what it does, and I go further and see that that's yet another inline function. But the good part, this is clear what's going on in there, right? You see that it iterates all the items in the list, and it transforms every given item eagerly, just in place. So if I would be using the infinite collection, well, we will never, ever have a result. We will have to wait forever for it to complete. But this is something which happens in place. So there is no delegation, there is no functions, there is no objects created. It just transforms the elements at the place where it is. Well, sometimes it's good, sometimes it's better, it's probably faster, I don't know. Well, but what is that inline? So now we know that the option 1 just computes anything in place, and the option 2 creates a lazy stream or sequence. Well, but what is inline? Well, you may have seen some defines in C. Well, it's not the inline in Kotlin. You may even remember inline keyword from C or C++. And again, it's not the inline which you can see in Kotlin. Well, you may have, wow, it's interesting. Our presentation is slowing down. Okay, so now you can see it's not this template which you may have in C++, but templates are really cool in C++ and complicated when you have some errors which don't fit your screen. Well, but inline, if we take a look on our kotlin-lang.org, the documentation, the inline modifier affects the function and the lambdas. All those are aligned into the place where you call it. So it means that the place where you call inline function is the place where the body of this inline function is actually substituted. Interesting, isn't that? Well, and then here is a more interesting example. Well, when we deal with locks in our programs, all the time we need to write a call like this. So you need to you grab the lock, you do some work, and then you release the lock. And I realize that all the times, and most of the times I see this, I tend to create such a function in Java, in Kotlin, in other languages, just to make sure that, well, I never ever forget doing unlock, and I'm really lazy to type these 5 extra lines all the time in all the functions where actual locking is needed. But okay, let's take a look how it works. So this is how I call this function. So I call this function lock, and I pass the lambda with a do some work function call. And there, here on the right in the gray, you see there's the log function copy pasted just for you for the reference. So this is how we tend to use it, right? Well, but now let's do my favorite trick. What we do, let's take a look what's going on inside at the bytecode level of that. Well, what we do, we try saying in IDE, or we may use any decompiling tool for Java or JVM, whichever we have, like Java P or something, or in this case, I just click this show Kotlin bytecode action in IDE, Android Studio, IntelliJ, any other would work, I guess. And we can see the bytecode. If you like the bytecode, that's all you need. Well, it might be tricky to read or understand, so that we can click the decompile button, and the magic would happen. What it will do, it will try to feed the bytecode from the Kotlin compiler into Java decompiler. And as long as the decompiler is something about the heuristics, well, in most cases, it would show you something readable. In some cases, it will be broken, or even it may fail to decompile if you do some tricky stuff, because the Java decompiler may not be ready to understand what's going on inside Kotlin, or how Kotlin compiles given expressions into bytecode. But we'll try to see what's going on. And sometimes you may think that something is behaving differently, but don't trust. Try the compiler and see, and try to understand why you see this given behavior and how it's related to, say, a bytecode or the behavior or to the program or to a library or whatever. Well, but still, this is a good thing to take a look inside. But okay, let's go. So you see on the right, this is the log from do some work. This is what we try to decompile. And this is how it looks after decompile. What we do, we actually call the log function, and we pass a lambda, which is an anonymous object in this case. This is how the Kotlin compiler compiles the lambdas to the bytecode. This is just an object which is created, and we pass it. So there are some magic functions created, but this which is breach, you may just ignore it. This is what it does. Is it good? Well, probably it is. In most cases, it might work, but could we do something different? Could we allow it to be better? But before we go further, let's summarize. So the lambda in Kotlin, well, lambda is compiled to a class which implements an interface like function and the number. The number depends on their number of parameters it has. Our lambda instance is created. Lambda instance can be cached depending on what you have as a closure in this lambda. Like if you depend on a parameter from a method, you have to create this all the times the method is called. If you, for example, have no parameters included into your lambda, then it's likely that the compiler put it as a static or instance field of your class. Well, it depends. But anyways, a class has to be loaded, the class has to be compiled, the class has to take some method counts, the class has to take some size for its bytecode. Well, let's try to make it better. And guess what? Inline helps us. What I do a tiny change. I say inline in this log function. The rest of these functions is the same as it was. The only inline is included. And this is the function, how we use it. No changes, just inline is included. And this is the bytecode which we have after decompile. And you see a vital difference. There is no function call at all. What happened? A compiler inline this function into a place where code. That's the trick. That's the inline fun. And that could help you to minimize or simplify programs. So the lambda is inline, as I mentioned. Well, our inline function helps to inline, but here is the problem. When you use inline, the size of your methods grows, and sometimes this may make your JVM or Android have a harder time optimizing this method, and it may slow it down on one side. On the other side, inline functions helps to evaporate the lambdas. So the lambdas are inlined, and there is no function calls, there is no extra function calls. I mean, there is no extra activities. So, but you should not trust me. You should not trust no one, anyone. The best thing is to trust your profiler. So don't trust me, trust your profiler and see how it works. Well, this was the warm-up or like the first part of my story. And I would like to share you yet another story on my own. I came across this example like last week, and I want to show you how I came up with yet another example of inline fonts with a different trick. So I've been doing some function which is supposed to cache something somewhere on the file. So if there is a cache, it just loads it. If there is no cache, it computes it and persists on the disk. Well, why I was looking for this, in my case, I've been doing some reporting application, and I had some data to compute, and then I had some code to render this data in a human readable way. And it turns out that the computation was kind of slow. It was doing some network stuff, or I don't remember what, but well, it took time. And when you debug this present results function, when I was debugging this one, I was not happy waiting for, like it's written in the slide, 8 minutes for it to compute every time. So I decided to cache the results the easiest way, the most nice way, so that I came up with an idea to, can I create a function, a generic function which takes type, and it stores it and restores it. All looks good, isn't it? And here's an example of how I might be using this. So I just wrap this slow computation in the cache functions. Well, sure, easy. Well, let's see if it works. And if you see some reasons why it may not work, just try to think about it. This is ideal stuff, but there is a tiny thing which is missing. And here it is, the type parameter. Would it work or would it not work? So what we do, what I do, I just want to show you, give you a hint. What I do, I just decompile this function declaration. And what you see that there is no type parameters in this thing because, well, this is how JVM works. There is no type parameters anymore. And it's called type erasure. It's pretty Googleable. In fact, that when you have generics, you have these only at their language level. At the bytecode level, there is no generics, so they are replaced with some most common types. That's it. So sometimes it may break. And what can be broken here? Essentially, this is a deserialization part. Once you have no type parameters in the function, given a file, it has to figure out the type which you're expecting it to return. There is no idea how it would make it. And of course, around this, I think it's a pretty old thing, but we had some number of their vulnerabilities around this deserialization when you allow the polymorphism. Having the polymorphism, you can try deserializing pretty any type with pretty any parameters. And in some cases, this was the way to do some remote code execution on the JVM. Well, I have a link here in the presentation. I guess there are more. Well, but what's about the serialization? What would I prefer? I decided to give it a try with the Kotlin X serialization, the library which generates the serializer and the deserializer from me. And the second one is the Jackson. The standard, I guess it's a standard JSON library. Well, let's see, let's try. So what I do, I just simply implement their serialization and the deserialization in the most trivial way. I don't care if it's possible to read the file or not. So it might be a file is missing, it might be our deserialization fails, but anyways, the run caching function helps me to just ignore these errors at all. And then lastly, I try to compute and store this value back. And this is a tricky thing. What I need to pass to Jackson is this object, which is type reference from T. I have no clue at that point what it means, but I just have to do this in order to make compiler happy. The same thing would go in Java, for example, just exactly the same code you can use there, but a little bit longer, I guess. Well, will it work? In fact, it does. So in this particular example, it works. Wow. So there is no problem. And it looks like I was just lying to you, saying, "Oh, wow, it may not work, but let's wait a moment." And here is a more complicated case, and it indeed fails. What's the main change was that I just decided to use some specific types instead of the standard types. And I wrap my data in some data classes, which you may like. And now it fails. And you see, it fails with the class cast exception. How? Class cast exception. The reason is that when we ask the Jackson to load this real read value from a file, that there is no type information because the types were erased. So it's actually has the request to read the value of type any or object. And Jackson does it best to read it so that it tries to figure out, okay, it looks like an array. Fair enough, here's an array. It looks like as a map, here's a map, but it has no clue on what to do with some parameters, and actually tries to return some maps or hash maps or something like that for every given parameter. That's why here on the first example, it was just happy, so the guess was right, and it was able to deserialize it in the right way. And here it failed because, well, it has no idea what to do with their, say, the parameter with the hash map with a name, and it fails. And according to the Java JVM bytecode specification, there has to be some type checks. And the Kotlin compiler includes type checks in the many places to make sure the program is more or less safe. And the verification when the bytecode is being loaded into the JVM tries to force everyone to have these assertions. And the JVM verification tries to make sure the code is tightly correct. And then at runtime, the JVM do these tests and checks if a given object on a stack has the given type. So it fails. And in fact, as I explained to you, the problem was in the type erasure because we forgot that the actual type T. And as long as we have it forgotten, so we failed. But how can we pass this type? Of course, the easiest way you can consider passing the class from T as a parameter to this function. It's a little bit ugly as the type can be computed by the compiler, but you have to pass it as a parameter anyways. So it's ugly. And the class from T would not be enough because the class from T is a subject to type erasure. So the class you'll see, but you would not see the type parameters again. So for example, you'll see the list, but you would not have the like a string or C1 as a parameter of this list. So the standard way which helps to keep this type parameters is this type reference. This is a type from Jackson library. And the trick is that this is the way how you can capture the whole type, the generic type, into the metadata. And there, I can, for example, create these definitions in my code, and then it works. Wow, long, but it works. So is there a way to make it shorter? Well, without this anonymous object, without the overcomplicating my code, can I still have the result? I don't know. Maybe it's me, or maybe it's the library which I use. Maybe it's something wrong. So I'll probably try another library. Can I achieve the result? So I switch to the Kotlin next serialization now, and I try to update my example to use this library. And what I have an error saying that I can't use T because it's not refined. So speaking the human language, it means that we cannot call this particular function because their type T is not inferred by the compiler. I have my speakers down. You hear me now or not? Yeah, I think you hear me.
Yeah.
So let's go. Okay, thank you, Enrique. So let's go. So what's happening here is that this decode from string function in the Kotlin externalization is declared with a fancy inline fun, and the generic has this refined prefix. And this is what we need to make sure that the compiler knows the actual type. And as you see here, there is yet another function in our Kotlin externalization where you can supply their type if you don't have it in the runtime. but it's not what we are looking for. But this trick helps us, and let's see what it means. So the refined keyword can be used only in inline functions, and this one makes the compiler to substitute this inline function is included into a place where you call it, and this type parameter is replaced with an actual type which you have. So in this particular case, it might mean that, say, we have this object type reference thing, then the T would be inlined, and this new anonymous class would be created with a specified type. Amazing, isn't that? So actually, saying this refined generic inline solves our example. So here's the solution with a Kotlin externalization. All I was needed to include this magic words at the beginning of my function. Nothing has changed. It works. Well, and they're speaking about the Jackson. That's again, anything I was needed to include this fancy refined fun inline function. That's it. So now, every time where I call this function, this whole function is included into a place where I call it. And then the type is replaced with an actual type, be it a list from string or a map from C1 or anything you would like to, anything the compiler can infer for you, it's included. And that means that this object type reference would capture the specific type. Magic, isn't that? But it works. And now my shorter example would work. So speaking about inline functions, the function is inline. So as I mentioned, anything is included. Lambdas are evaporated. Anonymous classes are copied. So every time you have an anonymous class in your Lambda, it will be a new anonymous class for every place where you call this Lambda. And refined types are substituted. And I forgot what yet another thing. I'm not using this trick here. Actually, I've been using this. Inside inline functions, inside lambdas, you can use return statement to return from the from your method. Just because you inline this lambda, there is no lambda, there is just a code, and return works as a usual return. That's a really cool trick. You can mix it, for example, with a run caching, as I've done before, or with a let, run, apply, or any other short helper functions from the standard library. Well, and to the end, here's a crazy trick. I'm not sure you would be using this, but it seems to work. So you can actually steal the class which is generated inside the inline function, and you can use this class for anything you'd need to. So that could be a sort of way to create the classes without creating a class. So as you see in this example, this lambda is called, for example, 1, and it's called second time, for example, 2. Every of these calls would create us a new class, which is more class above. And these are different classes because we have two different places where we call this inline function. And as long as the lambda which you pass in there has no parameters captured, you can even create this class, like I showed you on the last part of the slide. Well, this is a tricky thing, and in my case, I use this to pass some script from one application, which is unit test, to another one, which is IntelliJ. And based on this, we can try to experiment and test the behavior of the real IntelliJ application, just writing some code blocks or lambdas in the test code. It's amazing. It really has really cool and short use cases, as far as I know. And if you have more use cases, just tell me. I will be happy to know how you can use it or how you use it. Well, I guess that was an actual fun of today, actual inline fun to be precise. And should you have questions, ask here, or you may reach me on Twitter or somewhere else. Thank you.
Thank you, Eugene. So, folks, if you have any question, as mentioned, feel free to write it here on YouTube, and Eugene will be happy to support you with them. Okay, in the meantime, I'll start connecting my other laptop to show my screen. So, Matthias Schicker says thank you.
Thanks for listening. It was fun that in the middle of the presentation, my headphones decided to beep, and it looks like because of the quietness, it decided to turn off. But then I forgot that the microphone was in the webcam, not in the headphones. So the connection was good.
Yeah, well, here we kept listening to you all the time.
That was why. But I was like, what? My headphones are turning off? Wait, how?
We have one question from Matthias Sicker. If you could say something about Inline.
Inline are the keyword which would actually be suggested to you by an ID and the place where you need it. And for example, if you have an inline function which takes a lambda, and you use this lambda inside another function which is not inline, or inside an anonymous object, or in such a places where inline is not possible, then you would be using this keyword to say that this particular lambda should not be inline. It should be just passing through. But you may have more than one lambda as a parameter, and one can be inline, and the other one can be just lambda.
Does it help you, Matthias? Okay. Any other question for Eugene? Okay, great. Good, then let me try to make here some sort of experiment. Have actually now like 2 computers. I'll be speaking on one and presenting through another one. So, okay. Well, thank you, Eugene. Like always, a fantastic talk. And if you folks want to follow him, he's also on Twitter, very active and speaking about the latest things he's doing and learning. So, Eugene, thank you so much, and see you next time.
Yeah, thank you for having me, or see you next time.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
So this is the last talk. I will be on one screen, as mentioned, talking, and on the other one, showing the slides. So, great. Good. So this is the last session. It's going to be about diving into the coroutines for the JVM. More specifically, I should have mentioned Android, and or more particularly Android, because I think I'm targeting this population and this demographic. If you're an Android developer and you don't use coroutines yet, you've likely been using RxJava or some other frameworks, and that's how I want to approach it. Super shortly about me, I do mostly Android and Kotlin for backend. I'm a GD member, and this is my Twitter account if you want to check anything with me. So first about coroutines. Coroutines are they are now very popular, and I think since well, JetBrains and integrated them in Kotlin, people have started talking about them. But they're actually like a pretty old paradigm for doing multitasking in other languages. This is the official definition from coroutines, taken from I think the Wikipedia. So if we are Android developers and we have, why do we want coroutines? So that, or well, mobile developers in general, we have some code like this where we have a user, we want to fetch some user data, and we just want to assign this to a field that we have on the screen. What happens if we run this on our code in Android? I normally make a dramatic pause of 10 seconds waiting for the answer, but since this is an online meeting, it's probably going to be a bit harder. So we get the network on main thread exception, because in Android we can't just we cannot operate the network on the main thread. So that's going to improve this thing. We will just run it on a different thread. So that's in principle should work, right? And we should be able to update our field. Well, then we might probably be getting this call from another thread exception. We cannot update that's not the real name of the exception, but we cannot update the UI from from some concrete threads, and we need to move them in, or we cannot update the UI from non-UI threads. Matthias Seeker said that application not responding. Yep, that can happen when we run something like this as well. Well, we could be solving this with callbacks. So we would be fetching the user data, and then when this is ready, we came back to our main app, to our main block. But here the problem is that generally with callbacks, it's easy to leak them, and that's really bad on a mobile app, because then the performance starts getting really bad. We get bad reviews, etc. And we end up sometimes with things like that. So if we have a lot of callbacks, this is called the callback hell, callback that are calling another callbacks, the code becomes pretty much unmaintainable. So we can, of course, do cancel the subscription. So in Android, even if it's still a sort of a manual process, because you need to remember, and sometimes it can happen that they're not properly canceled, we could essentially assign them to a subscription, and every time we're leaving the activity or fragment, we cancel them. The problem is that this does not scale very well. Of course, we can have like composite subscriptions where we annotate some code when we subscribe some operations, and we cancel them all at once, but we might need to have individual ones or different groups, so this can still happen. We could be using also syntax that is 2021. So so reactive Java, this is a solution that has been used for a while on to deal with the problem of asynchronicity. And the code looks similar to some parts we had before. So we see here that we're subscribing, we have this auto-disposable, and we're calling the fetch user, which returns as an observable with a generic of type user. And we can have also live data on Android. So in Android, it's very similar. So we'll have the live data object generified with a user. We just observe on the view lifecycle owner, and we just can update our field. So those, let's summarize until now. We have our live data that is based on the observable data holder pattern, RX Java that is using observable, the schedulers and observers, and coroutines that use suspendable computations. So one problem with live data is that it's not fully complete, only supports the main thread. And RX Java is a complete solution, but it's very easy to misuse. It feels sometimes like an overkill and requires some learning curve. So I think in general, you can't start doing RX Java the first day. Coroutines are simplified, comprehensive, and robust. Everybody says the same from any software framework, but they really are. They're very simplified when you read them, very human, comprehensible, and they're a robust solution. And right now they have first-class support from Google in Jetpack. Google is moving a lot towards Kotlin and coroutines as well. So it's probably the choice, the right choice at the moment. So in a nutshell, coroutines simplify async code by taking those callbacks we would have had and replacing them. Let's check at this blocking call. We are trying to load a user. So we will be calling this API object. We will fetch the user and show it on the screen. This is how it works. Essentially, the fetch user operation starts, and until it's not finished, the onDraw method of the view, it cannot be called because it's blocked. And we saw when it has finished, which leads into what Matthias has posted here, automated application not responding or similar problems. If we have this async piece of code here, see that essentially now we have replaced, or now this API is being called asynchronously. This is how it would work. We would call fetch user, the app keeps throwing, and when it's ready, we just display the result. Let's see how coroutines work. So this code is very similar to the previous one. We're just using the suspend keyword in front of the function, and we call the API the fetch user function. This gets assigned to a user, and we just display this. So it's very easy to read. And essentially, this is when we call suspend, we keep the execution of the software, and when it's resumed, we keep moving without blocking any section of our code. Suspend and resume are replacing callbacks. So under the hood, coroutines work like that. We will have the suspend function that is loading some data and returning some data. Under the hood, they have this continuation data object that is the the object that is doing all the is generified with the type data and is doing all the magic of stopping and resuming. If you want to get some more technical context on this object, you can check this call from here by Roman Elizarov from 2017, deep dive into Kotlin coroutines, where he dives a lot into the technical details for this. So coroutines, okay, we have these two pieces of code. So coroutines with the suspend function and the async with the callback. See that they're essentially the callback now is a suspend keyword. So let's see how this would work under the hood. So first, what the compiler sees that we have this suspend. First, we need to specify also where do we run in with dispatcher of thread. So in order to do that, see that we are assigning this function to the with context. We're passing a dispatcher. We'll see later a few more dispatchers here, and we have a default IO or main. If we come from the Android world, default could be the for CPU operations. So the default one, IO would be all those threads or all those operations that need to do something with network or disk, something like writing on your database or downloading some content from your API. And main would be the main thread on Android. Sorry, let me see if I can go back here. Yeah, so the default one is recommended for data-intense operations. If you need, like, I don't know, to execute an algorithm that needs to do a lot of calculations or computer vision, it's probably good to do it there. Then we will have in the example we've seen before, we'll have here our blocking calls and our code will function properly. How this works under the hood. We call our function load user, download the user displaying it, and well, we have this main thread stack. When the compiler sees that there is this suspend keyword over here, it will note it on the thread, on the stack, and say, hey, now we're standing with a suspend function. Everything above will be a coroutine, and everything underneath is a regular function. And then it will keep moving. It will take the function name, load user, it will store it on the stack. It will keep exploring, executing now the fetch user app, and waiting until piling it on the stack, and then we'll wait until the result comes. So at some point, fetch user has finished, and then at some point, we start consuming all the previous objects that we had, and the function can resume the execution. So again, summarizing, so we are not very lost. They replace callbacks, coroutines replace callback, and they provide main thread safety. We have a few building blocks to work with coroutines. We've seen before with context, which returns some result, and if there is any exception uncut, it crashes the app. We also have launch and async. Launch works with job, which we also will see later. It's fire and forget. Things happen, and we can handle a few things with the job. And if there is an uncut exception, it crashes the app. Async return a non-blocking feature, a deferred, and uncut exception is returning this deferred object. And we also have the coroutine context that we'll see a bit later. We have UI, common pool, and unconfined. UI dispatch the execution in the main thread in Android, common pool into the Android background, and unconfined into the current thread. So launch, let's see how launch works. So we have now these two contexts, one coroutine context UI, another one common pool. Let's call them UI context and background context. Let's see at this piece of code. We will have this function load data. Initially see that we saw the loading indicator, we fetch the data, we display it on the screen and hide the loading icon. So we're gonna add this launch specified in the UI context. That means that this operation will start in the UI context. So we can actually update the UI without any problem. And this result, it will execute the operation to get the data on the background thread, so it doesn't block the UI. We can do more things. We can, for example, launch two tasks sequentially. See that here we have a similar code. So loading, displaying data, and hiding the loading. And in the middle, we have these operations. We can call results 1 and 2, and when they get launched sequentially, when first 1 and then 2. We can launch 2 in parallel. So if we're using this async keyword here, and then as we see at the bottom, we will be calling the await, both tasks will start at the same time. Right, and we can have also this deferred object here. See that we can create them on a list, and then call it await all. We will release all of them at the same time. We can launch them with a timeout, very useful for HTTP calls in case something happens to our backend. So specifying with timeout or null and the unit and the amount of seconds typically that we want to run this coroutine, then it will time out if it doesn't finish by that time. Canceling the coroutines. This is something very interesting. As mentioned, in Android, we'll have this problem of coroutines being, running and trying to update something when maybe the fragment or the activity doesn't exist. So this is an important part of working with coroutines. Same thing, we have our load function, and that is starting a coroutine and doing something. See that we are having an object job, and we are assigning the result of, or we are assigning load data to job. Then we can call a function like cancel on the job. There are actually a few. This job has more things. Has things like to check if a coroutine is active, if it has been canceled, if it has been complete. We can see the children, the canceled children, invoke when it has been completed, etc. Error handling. We want to handle errors, of course. Well, we can use try catch. If something happens on our coroutine, we catch it and handle it. That's the standard one. We can store it inside a deferred object. So here we have this. We'll have this deferred object, and we invoke on we call the function invoke on completion. And if there is any throwable, we can handle it as well. We can use a coroutine exception handler. So when we are launching the coroutine, we specify the context as well as the exception handler, and then we'll be able to handle it. We can return null if exception, if there is an exception. So in this case, we would be calling await. If something happens, we handle the exception and return null. So there is no result, and then we know that something is not right. Here, you might be. I think there is some frameworks like Arrow that provides this sort of empty or nothing objects, etc. So I think it can be R whether things should be nullified or not. We can, right, so here we would do something like we perform the operation, the result is different of null, then success or failure. We can return an object, including if the function has been a success or not. For example, we will have our type, our generic type success. If there is an exception, we return the exception. And we basically can use also silk classes. I think that's very used for handling these sort of errors from backend and etc. Here we would do the success is different of null. We have a type of success T. Otherwise, we can handle the exception. Testing. We can test coroutines. We have let's think of this presenter. This presenter would have the two contexts, and it will have a function called load data. See that here, this could be your favorite testing framework. We could be calling the unconfined thread. In this case, we would test whatever we want to do with our presenter. We would load data, and then we would verify with a mock that things have loaded or that we're providing the data. Is this replacing RxJava? Here I also do a dramatic pause. So there are a few analogies. Subscribe on could be the initial context. Observe on with context. In coroutines, disposable are similar to jobs. So I think it's the jumping from RxJava into coroutines is not going into completely unknown realm. It's there are many similar things that are going to be similar and familiar. I believe that coroutines are a few other things are more simplified, easier to learn, and they don't require this big learning curve that can happen with RxJava. So before in retrofit, we could have those referred objects where we store the response. Now, since the version 2.6 or 2.7, I think, we can add the suspend keyword, and then those they will be automatically coroutinified if that's a verb that exists. If we use room in Android, we can also use suspend function. This would automatically make the DAO use coroutines for operations of inserting, updating, deleting, whatever. And we can also do it on transactions. So if we have a transaction in room that is performing several operations, we could also make this suspend. Yeah, so okay, we have this sample repository here. We want to clear data, so we call the database object with transaction, and then the functions inside could be coroutines. So if we want to test room, we can also test it. This example is part of the official example from Google. We will be calling this RAM blocking function that I've only seen in tests, not really in the real world. This is actually what it says it does on the documentation. It runs a new coroutine and blocks the current thread interruptedly until its completion. So probably makes sense for tests, not for other places. So I saw this survey somewhere in Twitter. I wasn't able to find the original source. I think it was like a year ago. And it was like some survey on coroutines. So 40% of the people wanted to use coroutines, 24 don't want to use coroutines. Not many people was using them. Some of them didn't know what coroutines are. So I guess the state has changed quite a bit since then, especially in this world that moves so fast. But yeah, I don't think you'll find them today in all the projects, which probably is good for if you charge money for coding, because there are a lot of things to do. So what to do? If it's a greenfield project, you should probably try. As said, Google is going Kotlin first for everything, and I think this trend is just going to continue. So if you have an existing project, you always need to check, like, do coroutines suit you? Do you need to do refactor? Do you have time? Can you afford to spend some time on a old app? How old is this app? The legacy code? Should you start with the small sections and doing it partially before migrating the entire code, etc., etc. A few resources more. So of course, the coroutines guide here. It's very comprehensive. Have all the information you need. They're open source. We're lucky enough that we can download them and see the entire code. There is a Kotlin Slack where many folks from JetBrains are there, and I think you can start discussions and generally ask questions you might have. They help quite a bit. If you allow me some self-expand the Kotlin Weekly, it's my site, my weekend project, and we have a lot of content from coroutines lately. It's been a few months like that, actually. And there are those code labs from Google that they teach you how to use coroutines on Android, explaining a few of the points I've mentioned and how to do it on a real app. So it's fairly straightforward to complete. So if you have more interest, I recommend you to take a look on this. And yeah, there is also this Android architecture blueprints where, well, Google showcases their architectural approach and recommendations to develop Android apps, which frameworks you should be using, how you should be using them, etc., etc. And they have actually examples for using Kotlin coroutines for background operations. Last, Chris Baines wrote many years ago, 3 years ago, this article on migrating from RxJava to Kotlin coroutines. Few things have changed since then, but I think it's a nice starting point if you find yourself in the situation where you have RxJava and you would like to have Kotlin coroutines. So, oops, I think I need to update this image. Nice Kotlin 1.4. So, don't block, keep moving. I hope you learned at least one new thing in this talk. If that was the case, I would be super happy. And if you have any question and I happen to know the answer, I would be more than happy to help you. If you don't happen to have any question now, you can always ping me later on Twitter and I'll check it out. Lubomir, when calling an API with suspend function with retrofitcator, you don't really need to be doing this on the iOS dispatcher, since the lib take care of threading, but it is still recommending to do it. Well, I think I don't know if retrofit is doing anything. Well, they have now they're suspend. Sorry, they support now the suspend function, so I assume they definitely do it on the IO dispatcher. If that's the case, it's obviously not required because that's already happening. I personally create myself this big dispatcher manager when I'm starting an app, and everything that is like a database request or network or sensible operation goes through the IO dispatcher. So yeah, technically not required. Probably not a bad idea if for integrity of the code you keep sending every any operation that can mess with the IOA into your own IOA dispatcher. So if you have folks more questions. So Livomir wrote, I do the same, like you described, to be honest, just in case I need to do extra stuff after the call. Yeah, like maybe you're like, I don't know, even like, as you said, downloading something and putting it on the database. I have like this, I don't know, like my app based dispatcher, and it already handles IO and everything, and I send everything there. And yeah, I don't risk like, I don't know, imagine there is an update and something changes. It shouldn't, but okay, folks, I had a lot of fun speaking remotely with you. Thanks again for attending the session. Please stay in touch with our meetup group. We'll announce another meetup likely for February, and we're actually speaking with a few folks from JetBrains and Google for those meetups. So yeah, feel free to comment anything on the group or reach by Twitter if you have any question. And hope you have fun, and hope to see you in an upcoming edition. Bye bye.